Good morning, colleagues. Welcome to the first open session organized by ESFRI, and very warm thank for accepting our invitation to something which is meant to develop to a new instrument designed as a part of a broader communication strategy of ESFRI. It shall bring ESFRI closer to its stakeholders and facilitate both ways communication on pressing issues between ESFRI and its stakeholders. These stakeholders are typically ESFRI projects, ESFRI landmarks, but also other infrastructures being a part of the interconnected research and infrastructure ecosystem, but also maybe ministries, user organizations, other policymakers, funding agencies. These stakeholders will be identified based on self-identification in one of the other instruments, which I will present later. But it is important to understand that decisions taken at the various levels, being it EU, national, or even institutional, immediately impact all the other levels involved in the policy. All the other layers are influenced. It's not only via budgetary considerations that interconnect directly many of the research infrastructures, but it is, and maybe even more importantly, the interconnected research ecosystem that horizontally and vertically, transversally, interdisciplinary, interconnects the various research infrastructures, the various user communities, the various scientific domains. And therefore, it's very important for ESFRI to understand these various linkages and the communication, the interaction with the stakeholders become a very important asset. Slide we are presenting now shows some important housekeeping rules. I would not read that, but please try to keep your microphones muted and use the chat option for asking questions. If you're disconnected, you may reconnect again with the same way you did connect to this room, and the colleagues will take care that you're then invited from the waiting room. And very important message is that this session is recorded, and we will use this for internal purposes first, and we shall have a discussion on that, how this propagates further, and how we can, by respecting all the regulations, can make these presentations at least public, so that a broader user community, stakeholder community can benefit from the presentations. If you have any questions or any doubts, please contact us under the given address, and we will try to treat your issue properly. The agenda of the meeting has been circulated. I apologize for the slight delay in the beginning. I will try to catch up. We will have, as said, divided this open session in 3 parts, where the first one already started. The chair shall communicate on the recent developments in ESFRI, and then we will have two sections related to a topical issue, which is now omnipresent and very pressing. Let me go directly to the next slide. When thinking how to structure my presentation, I have chosen a very straight outline. So the ESFRI White Paper is one of the most important results. It's a result of several years of very intense discussions within ESFRI and with the various stakeholders. Several of you may remember the La Palma workshop or the workshops we have had on research infrastructures and data issues. And it is one of the biggest achievements of ESFRI from the past 2 or 3 years. So it is connected to further profiling of ESFRI in the post-2021, and it will certainly drive many ESFRI actions in the years to come. But even more broader, this white paper is becoming a very important reference document when it comes to the general research and innovation agenda at the EU level, and it contributes to the role model of ESFRI as an informal but very, very effective and influential body when it comes to research policy scenes. So it seemed to me very natural to start from here. I am not going in many details. The next slide just shows the structure and the main messages we have drawn in the ESFRI white paper in top of the 42 messages, which in detail then address several issues. So it's just for refreshing the memory that I am now presenting these 3 key pillars of the ESFRI strategy, which will be certainly in the next year implemented in some more detail and will influence us and you in many senses. So we are arguing that research infrastructures are a very essential part of the European research area, that this interconnected ecosystem of research infrastructures is a very important element interconnecting scientific excellence with innovation, interconnecting different scientific disciplines, including all the other related aspects like education and skills and training. We also are advocating that research infrastructures are strategic investment, by far more important aside the research domain, having huge impact on for example, regional development, and they are very much connected to bringing coherence into European and national and even regional priorities. So it's also clear that, to us at least, that research infrastructures are major promoters of open science, and that many aspects of the newly established European Open Science Cloud would not be successfully or cannot be successfully implemented if research infrastructures do not provide fair and quality certified open data. So research infrastructures are omnipresent, very important, gaining on importance, and this shall be the red tape in my presentation. The next slide, I have for today selected 3 topics which are now in the focus of ESFRI's discussions and considerations, and we are taking steps towards implementing them. So there is a broad stakeholder engagement strategy of which this open session is a part of. This is really something which is considered by ESFRI of high importance, because establishing a new communication and strengthen the engagement with the various stakeholder groups is really a way forward to increase the relevance of ESFRI's policy advice. We really want to work on a more systemic exchange with the stakeholders and establish really new communication tools and platforms for better and transparent information in both ways. The other line I would like to highlight here is something which directly results from various chapters and messages from the white paper, and this is the strategic positioning of research infrastructures in the currently discussed new era concept. It's my deep conviction that research infrastructures are really contributing sizably to the concept of the European research area, and we shall really promote the importance of research infrastructures in this policy domain, because there are many examples, and one of them will be discussed today, that research infrastructures contribute to societal science and are contributing to European competitiveness, not only in science, but also in economic terms, are a sizable element contributing to social well-being. And the last point is the very obvious one, but of course, the core business of ESFRI remains in the policy domain, and we are providing advice based on the understanding of scientific merits and societal relevance of research infrastructures. So we are still elaborating on and evolving, improving the concept of our roadmaps. We are working towards a very strategic perception of the landscape analysis of European research infrastructures and globally, and we are also developing new and robust monitoring approaches. I'm seeing it takes too long, so let me speed up a little bit. The next slide shows that what I already mentioned, so I will just very briefly go through. So we are trying to design new instruments which makes the communication with the stakeholders more efficient, which complement the existing tools we are using and have been using in the past, like exchange of experience workshops. I already mentioned the La Palma one, the dedicated ESFRI conferences on policy issues, engagement with the ESFRI community, with research infrastructures, all the instruments like info days, open consultations, the ESFRI web, the presence in social media. So what we have proposed and agreed in the forum is the establishment of new instruments that will be a stakeholder platform, which shall be used to identify, based on self-registration, new stakeholders shall contribute to a discussion as a discussion platform for these stakeholders to articulate opinions contribute to some surveys and becoming an instrument for further ESFRI actions in this domain. The version 1 or even 0.8 will be presented during the Research and Innovation Days in June, and we will further develop on this instrument. Similarly important will be a stakeholder forum, which will be held on serious policy matters and topics with a certain periodicity, and we will use it as a discussion or an exchange platform, communication platform with research infrastructures and other stakeholders, broader communities on serious research infrastructure relevant matters. The first stakeholder forum, as you all know, will take in December during the ESFRI days in Slovenia, hopefully as a face-to-face meeting, and it will focus on an important topic which I will try to touch upon also in the remaining 5 minutes, namely research infrastructures in the European research area. We have the third instrument of which you are a part of now. This is the ESFRI Open Sessions. Next slide shows what has been already communicated to most of you, so no surprises. We are keeping the first open sessions a little bit restricted because it's a kind of still pilot or self-learning exercise, but we have already discussed that there will be 2 other open sessions, one in December 21, which will concern the involvement of research infrastructures in the Green Deal, and in spring 2022, an open session on big data or the data challenges for research infrastructures in general. You can read the rest of the slide. I'm not going to do it for you, but what I would like to advertise here, that in order to improve this open session concept and make it really a tool where the interactions with the stakeholders also propagate in formal terms, we have prepared a couple of polls which will be running during this open session, and even so in the preparatory discussions we discovered that the impact of the current polls will probably not be very high. We still hope that some of you will respond to the polls and contribute to better understanding of the expectations and of the needs when further developing the concept. Let me move very quickly through the remaining 4 slides I have prepared. I'm again highlighting that research infrastructures are a very focal point of the European research policy agenda. They are penetrating in all strategic documents, are deeply forming the discussion on the new European research area concept, have found entry as a reference to the Commission's communication on the European research area in the strategic, in the staff working document of the European Commission. You can read strong support to research infrastructures. Similarly, at the member state level, research infrastructures are considered very, very important, and the reference is made to the white paper. This let's say, political and verbally articulated support will hopefully propagate to greater role and appreciation of research infrastructures in the new era, and it shall be reconsidered whether research infrastructures are not only one of the main pillars of the European research area, but maybe together with EOS, also its real kernel. The next slide shows in a very condensed form the status of the current discussion on the new European research area. I'm trying to highlight being present in the discussion as ESFRI chair to really highlight the role of research infrastructures and find a proper way how to position research infrastructures in this new evolving policy concept. And we shall really all with a joint effort at the member state level, at the European level, try to advocate that research infrastructures remain a very visible objective of the new era concept. The next slide, I'm almost ashamed to show it because it's known to everybody. So let's rush through it very quickly. It shows that for the next roadmap, one shall not expect any huge surprises. We are only a little bit improving our roadmap concept without any major changes. We are progressing in making the landscape analysis to a future strategic tool. We are continuing in making a steady evolution on the impact on the assessment of scientific relevance and implementation readiness of all the projects, being it projects or landmarks. We are slightly improving our roadmap towards a more strategic perspective, but major changes have to be expected with the next roadmap first. Let's skip the next slide, which again only summarizes some features of the landscape analysis in more detail. And let me finalize my presentation with thanking you for the participation, hoping that you will find this new instrument quite useful. I promise that in the next open sessions, we will take very seriously your contributions to the concept and comments on the concept, and we will try to improve it. And the last slide I am showing here makes the bridge to the topics being addressed in the more topical parts of this open session. Thank you for listening. Okay, colleagues, I am probably now the moderator, but in the heat of the preparation, I missed the agenda, but I guess that as we are delayed, one shall allow only few questions. Looking to the chat, there is nothing pressing. There is in principle no questions. So let's swiftly proceed in the agenda. And I guess the moderator of the next session will take over now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Lucia, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you, Ianna, for this overall introduction, and thanks ESFRI for giving this, to organizing this open session, and to give the possibility to present to the activities of ESFRI infrastructure. I am Lucia Banci. I'm from the Health and Food Strategic Working Group, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to present activities, some myself, some the other colleagues, of the activities of the health and food infrastructure as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And these are, you know very well, the infrastructures that are active now in the health and food domain. And these have been very, very fast in reacting to this pandemic. And they work on two levels, providing services and access to a quite variety of different type of services, going from analyzing the virus structure, characterizing the intact virus, the various components, and to development vaccine drugs, and testing them and doing clinical trials, data organizing, or making them open access to the to all the scientists. So this has been very active since the beginning. And I would like to present a few activities, two examples of what has been performed and is ongoing now. And starting from the arena, that is the infrastructure devoted to working on highly pathogenic agents. So it provides facilities for biosafety facility of very high level, where these pathogens can be handled and characterized. And so then they provide a key contribution, both in increasing, in providing the services for this, and in increasing the capacity of Europe with this respect, because they provide expertise and the training, the expertise for setting up new of these facilities, which are more and more required in for research with this specific topic. And so there were two Central Eastern Europe countries which developed this new biosafety laboratory facilities, and then ERINIA was the reference for having all the expertise and the information to set up this, as well as also exploiting additional funding for the European Commission. They were able to open a number of calls and to support a number of projects which were run, going from the development of synthetic antibodies with the project together with the Chinese Academy of Science, which also is very good indication of the international dimension of the infrastructure, a support to a Swedish SMEs for developing treatment against SARS-CoV-2, as well as with a German company for developing new generation of diagnostic. So that is going on in the other infrastructure. InfraFrontier is the infrastructure which provides mouse model for characterizing genetic aspects in human diseases. And also they've been very fast in responding to the needs of the scientific community and to make available a series of strains, mouse strains, for the research on different aspects of research related to COVID. And specifically, I mean, they open calls and they for supporting projects, and they receive as 4 times more applications than the available slots. They were quite fast in providing the tools for initial assessing of vaccine and treatment, and they develop the mouse models which are sensitive to SARS-CoV-2. This is very useful instruments, and they have this is a joint contribution of a number of centers of this infrastructure. Is just impressive nature that is quite useful contribution. Eurobi-imaging, so the infrastructure on the image, providing a series, a palette of techniques and instruments for imaging a different on different type of specimen at different time of resolution, and they were immediately able to set up remote assess in such a way that people can send this, researcher can send the samples, and they will be performed by technician in the infrastructure, and as well as to have virtual access. And this imply also training of users, and this was true for other infrastructures as well, where they were develop training program for teaching and training the users to exploit the remote access. In some cases, you can, in many cases, you can really run the instrument remote. This was already working in the past, but this has been reinforced heavily in this period. And you can understand that the imaging characterization has multiple aspects and has quite a strong relevance in this, and the activities were going from characterizing imaging of the pathogen and characterizing the virus life cycle, the interaction between the host and the pathogen, and the way how the pathogen and the virus enter the cell. And you can have detailed characterization of these aspects. And on the other side, there is the other component of this Eurobi-imaging infrastructure is the medical imaging, that it is an essential aspect in characterizing the effect of the viral infection on these specific imagings of lung, and how are affected in different stages and under different type of treatment. Central has been on this respect a open screen, which is the infrastructure for chemical biology and for drug screening and drug discovery. And they provide a series of libraries of fragment and molecules for researchers to screen against various targets. And they have been fast in setting up databases for specific data portal for COVID-19, and were working together in conjunction with Instrat to develop a drug to identify molecules based on the structure characterization molecules which inhibit proteins that are essential for the virus replication, the virus life cycle, as well as were involved in this escalate for COV, that is a EC-funded project which is based on repurposing already existing drugs, which so that already approved drugs, which can be exploited and used against the virus. And another infrastructure will play a key role on this type of research. COVID-19 focus is integrated structural biology, which provide a series of technique and technologies for structure characterization, and so then has been very fast in setting up a remote access, and all this infrastructure has created a priority access line for services to for COVID-19 related projects. Has been set up a COVID-19 resource center where is clearly indicated and listed the services which could be most useful for researcher in this area, as well as all flash reports on the achievements and the results. There were priority of to projects, and then, for example, the Dutch Center of Instruct and Cryo-EM was established collaboration with Janssen Vaccine and characterized the well-known spike protein, and there was set up a protein portal for COVID-19. Instruct and some center of Instruct were involved in global and international level projects, and that were including some on the structural characterization, mostly through X-ray and cryo-EM, and very quickly from February 14 in 2020, already in March, they were able to do the structure of the some particles and some proteins of the virus, and they were also developed this programs for visualization of proteins. And just the most recent work that has been characterized, for example, the molecular basis of the different behavior of the variants, of how the different variants interact with antibodies and with the receptors. There was also on the NMR-based international project, which allows to characterize also the dynamical aspects of the different components of the virus and the mode of interactions with different molecules. So overall, this is a presentation of some of the more biological basic research infrastructure. And I think I stop sharing here, and then I ask now Anton Ussi, that is the operational director of EATRIS, and he will present some of the achievement and the results of the more medical-oriented infrastructure in this domain. Anton, please.
Good morning, thank you. Is it not due to be Elixir and Nicholas first?
In the program, you were first before.
Okay. Apologies, and I misread it. Thanks. Okay, I'll share my screen. Thanks very much for the invitation to join. Do you see the full screen?
Yes.
Super, okay. So the Alliance of Medical Infrastructures, it's the patient-centric infrastructures who have regular contact with the patient. When we've come together in an alliance covering biobanking, so the molecular basis of the research domain, through to translational research, which is applying the knowledge into the development of new interventions, and then also the multinational clinical trials aspect of ECRAN. So you can see that we're able to support through these infrastructures the research underpinning really developing the basic understanding of what's happening in the disease, supporting what's being done in all those other infrastructures that you beautifully described, and very impressive to see what has been done. And we can support the development of that knowledge towards vaccines, treatments, and diagnostics as well. So we focus a little bit on that today. So starting with BBMRI, so right at the beginning, BBMRI did an inventorization process to understand who has the resources necessary for the research. So obviously, the COVID samples and the attached data, the clinical data, are a very important part of the research process. So they were very quickly able to identify the biobanks around the world that could provide the resources necessary, and also who would be available for prospective sample and data collection as well. Very important for all these hundreds of new projects that were started up in a very short period of time. Also very importantly, and I think Jan was talking a little bit earlier about the remit and the importance of ESFRI infrastructures. I think one thing very important obviously is being guardians of the quality and the robustness of the research process, which also means that the resources are of high quality, or the provenance is known and understood, and variability is reduced to a minimum. It's the technologists who know the machines and know that in that context of use, that specific research question, that machine and that analytical technology is right. I think that's such an important part of what we do. And here you see BBMRI was very quick to jump on, making sure that quality and reproducibility were recurrent themes in the research process. So they were doing workshops on developing SOPs and guidelines, ensuring that best practice was disseminated quickly, also organizing webinars, and also supporting actively in the ethical, legal, societal issues with their ELSI help desk, which was had a continuous expert exchange there as well. And also working together with other partners, the COVID-19 data portal, ensuring coordination there to access the data there. BBMRI was involved in all major EU-funded initiatives, which is important to hear, and also at the frontline scientific process as well. And also coordination with AMRI, so our partners, and also international partners as well. So a very strong response from BBMRI. I'll move now to ECRAN. So ECRAN developed, I think, two very, very important areas. One was actually getting involved in all of the major clinical trials, so the major European-funded large clinical trials that were set up. So they were involved in the EU response, which covered both Discovery and SolidAct. They were in the Remap COVID project and the Vaccelerate project also. Now, the Vaccelerate project was very important because it was to bring platform trials. So the concept of being able to have a centralized control arm and then be able to add new investigative arms onto the trial on a rolling basis. It's a very important method of doing clinical trials in complex environments with lots of investigational drugs or therapies. And ECRAN was able to bring their expertise in there. So they've contributed in all of these, in the design, the planning, the ethical, regulatory support, monitoring, and data management and data sharing. Very important development there. And also the toolbox that ECRAN managed, it has also been very useful. So they developed this toolbox that also contained a literature review, a metadata information repository on clinical trials on running, open funding calls, and fast-track regulatory approvals for COVID trials. So really a dashboard of all the activities around clinical research, which was phenomenal. I think 2 months or 3 months in into the COVID response, I think there were already more than 1,200 clinical trials running worldwide, which was quite scary. Also in EOSC Life, ECRAN was developed a GDPR compliant patient level data repository to allow data sharing as well. And also there's been a coordination of clinical research through those activities. So here you see those clinical trials I mentioned. Sorry, I went back to front. Also very important is this coordination of clinical research, as I mentioned, because there was such a splintered and fragmented response. So also for future learning, very important for us to see what went well and what didn't go so well here. And I think the fragmentation of the research in the first 6 to 9 months ended up in a lot of underpowered research being done that could have been better coordinated. And so there again, I think ESFRI has a very important role to play for the future. For IATRIS, we're based on really the confirmatory research to help get towards the patient with knowledge or a concept. We undertook four actions. One was to actually also look at research policy. We saw what the research agenda was needing, and we came out with policy papers on that. We supported our academic research community. We supported product development as well. through accelerated response time for drug and vaccine development research services, and we had an internal research activity from a research forum. So we quickly developed a 48-hour turnaround time when anybody would come with a research question, so that we could handle a fast response. In the end, we had, I think, around almost 30 projects come to us, vaccine projects, drug development projects, for a very wide range of types of requests. Almost half of them were industry, from SME or large pharma, and the rest were academic. We had a couple of governmental requests as well, wanting to validate technologies before that they could be bought. So it was anything from regulatory advice. This we did, for instance, through the Transvac project. There was funding there to provide regulatory advice for the IMPD for a new virus, like a VLP-based vaccine. There was also support in giving expert advice on how to set up BSL labs. We did that in collaboration with IRINIA, and doing things like in vivo immunogenicity challenge studies in preclinical models and developing novel diagnostic tests. So really a very broad range of the types of requests we had.
Thank you, Anton. I think we have.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
And if you stop sharing, and
sure.
Niklas can present the activities of Elixir. Thank you, Niklas.
Thank you. Anton, I think you will have to stop sharing.
Yeah. Sharing, Anton.
Yeah, just trying. Thank you. Yeah, got it. Is that it? Yeah.
So I hope you can see the screen now. So thank you very much for the invitation to present. So what I'd like to share very briefly is the activities that we've done within the framework of the European COVID-19 data platform. So this is work from Elixir in very close partnership with the EMBL EBI. And on the screen, you will see the small core team that we've had. This has been supported graciously by the European Commission. But I just want to stress, and I'll come back to that, that none of this would have been possible without all the national centers throughout Europe that are part of these distributed infrastructures. That's really the foundation for all the work that we've done in the platform. This is also part of the European Commission's action plan towards Corona, the ERA versus Corona action plan, where of course access to research infrastructures and access to open data was two of the foundational sort of cornerstones of that response. And some of the funding for this work is coming out of these Commission initiatives. So really what we've tried to do, and I think we have achieved in the data platform, is really to open up data and give rapid access for researchers to data, to tools and the workflows. We've done this with open standards, and we work with partners in Europe and actually globally to make sure that the coverage is global and there is also access of all the data globally. So I think this has really enabled diverse research in the fight towards COVID-19. I see this really as a success story for open science. So if we look in the little bit more than a year now since we launched this platform, there's now over 700,000 records there. It covers all the molecular sciences. So I think actually all the data that you showed in your presentation, Lucia, is actually now integrated and available through the platform, which I think is fantastic. And I think that's one of the real beauties of open data, is the fact that you can, without thinking about licensing or red tape, you can start to mix scientific data across fields and really see what's happening in the context of a diverse set of experiments. It's quite popular. So we have about 126,000 individual users to date, about 4 million requests. So there is a couple of sort of tens of thousands of requests on a daily basis to the portal. And most of the data right now is the raw viral sequences, of course, with variants spreading across Europe. The viral sequences are critical. And I just want to stress this again, it's collaboration with the EMBL EBI. So these are core molecular archives at the European Center, which is funded, of course, by the member states in Europe, 27 European states. It's the European life science research infrastructures that have come together, and mostly through the EOSC Life project. I'll say a word about that. but it's really also based on the national centers, the national infrastructures that are sort of the nodes in this rich European research infrastructure landscape. So we have been funded and done some of this work through the EOSC project, and a lot of the drivers is coming through EOSC. So I think this is really showing how the scientific communities form part of the European Open Science Cloud. As Anton said, we're building a repository for clinical trial data, we're funding the portal, but there's also a lot of work in other centers on workflows, on tools, on cloud access from these national centers. So there is a rich response from our national nodes. So almost all European countries have formed a sort of national initiative. I'm not going to have time to go through that, but we have an interactive map on our homepage that really links to these national initiatives. And I think that's really the basis, and I would encourage you to go and browse what's happening across Europe. So part of what we've done is really try to strengthen these national interactions. And so we've had a lot of plenary calls with all the national coordination teams. We've had lots of bilateral calls to looking at what are the bottlenecks at individual countries and how we can overcome them, and really try to sort of engage to support the mobilization of a rich data set around COVID-19, and also help to drive the national coordination by provision of toolkits and other things. And a part of this is the buildup of national portals that are tied together. I think a really nice example is actually the Swedish portal, who put out all of the materials as open source, and so allowed other countries to rapidly steal with pride and bring in best practices as this sort of network of national portals are being built. And that, of course, is what feeds the European portal. So just some quick highlights on the data portal, but in particular, I think the SARS-CoV-2 data hubs is the mobilization at the really now growing scale of the viral genomes, and with fortnightly reporting and calling of variants, and trying to instill some sort of normative standards around phylogenetics and lineages. So that's, I think this has been really quite rewarding. I'm looking at time. We've also looked at the human data and the human genomes, but I will skip that in the interest of time and just spend the last 2 minutes on a few other points. So one is open data advocacy. Open data isn't always uncontroversial. Viral data has been difficult to mobilize, and part of what we've done is a open letter, and you will have seen in Nature and Science that it has caused some stir in the community. And so we are continuing to drive the advocacy for open data with some really high profile signatories, including a couple of Nobel Prize laureates. So I think we're trying to really to sort of shift the narrative and the practices in this field. I just want to end with 2 points. And the first is that this is part of the European Open Science Cloud. And I think it's a really good example. If one sees the European Open Science Cloud as a sort of an e-infrastructure consolidation component, an open science policy component, and then the scientific and the research communities with the different clusters, content and users, I think what we have done really sits in this open science and mobilization of data from the communities. And I think we can show what power there is in this sort of rich European network. So I'll like to end with that, if I may, Lucia, just with this point. I think these distributed infrastructure, and Elixir is one of them, but I think I speak on all of the behalf of all the life science infrastructures. The data here comes from most of them. It's really about building synergy between national investment to develop our collective capabilities. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Niklas. And very quickly, the question, thanks. There were 2 questions, one very specific by Agnieszka, and she asked in which countries, Central Europe countries, are the 2 new BSL-3. I should admit I received these slides from Erinia and I didn't ask. I can check and I can send you this information. And then from Ondri, there is a more general question to Agnieszka. Okay, then let's go to the more general questions asking which would be, if there will be a change in the strategy, so will be a three of us changing strategies, and which would be the activity with the biggest impact. I mean, starting from the basic biological research, I would say that in some extent this approach and strategies to implement all these remote service provision and coordination of the activities of more than one infrastructure, open screen and Instrat, aerobiomaging and so on, this has been somehow implemented so we can reinforce and optimize what I think is activities with the largest impact. I would say at this stage, the variant characterization is strategic, as well as to progress on, beside analyzing the vaccine behavior and the interactions and the molecular aspects of that, is also the drug and treatment, because this is also another aspect which needed to be advanced, because nowadays there is no drug against COVID-19, and this is one important point. If you want, Anton and Nicholas, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think I'll add one thing. So I think there are a couple of things that we are changing now in the coming months. So the focus up to now, and Jessica, really have been on the viral genomes, and to some extent on hosts. So that's human genome and understanding the host response. I think the viral genome, it's a lot of work there, but it's sort of largely planned out. I think the focus now, and we're starting up projects for that, is also to see how we can work across fields. So one strand of that is to do deeper integration with the type of data that Lucia provided in her presentation, so imaging, molecular screening, and clinical trial. The other is that we're working across fields. We had some really good discussions with the social science infrastructures last week, and see how we can start to bridge the sort of societal context with the molecular data. I think Axel will say give a fantastic example of that. But I think that's the next, as we're thinking about long COVID and the impact on societies, those will be really important things to address. To Agnieszka, also very quickly, I think about maybe a little bit more than half of the requests are from within Europe, and about the rest is from the rest of the world. We see about 75% of the world's raw viral sequence data is going through the platform at this point, but actually we are driving partnerships with Asia and US to balance out that, because the idea is that different parts of the world will balance with their local infrastructures.
Anton, do you want to add something on this?
Sure. I think just, two very fast points. One, I think getting a deeper understanding of the immune response and what can trigger the different types of phenotypes that we see. There's a lot of work being done on that, but I think that needs to go a lot deeper. So really deep the immunotyping and the phenotypical response is an important area for us to understand better, so that we know who's at risk of the worst presentation of COVID. And I think overall, from a policy perspective, I think we should take a moment to breathe and also have a little bit greater coordination between also the national funders. So rather than have underfunding small studies in your country, try and find mechanisms to coordinate. The European Commission has done an outstanding job in a short amount of time, but I think that the national funders can also work together a little bit more.
Last flash question to I would say Nicholas, which would be the future of the COVID data platform?
Yeah, I was about to write that to John. I think unfortunately pathogens are to stay with humanity for probably for all time. The platform in itself is generic, and I think there are two things. So one is, of course, the genomic surveillance of SARS-CoV-2. So the COVID virus will be here for many years to come. And of course, the platform is an asset that is usable for any pathogen, sort of any microbe or virus, and of course that's the lasting infrastructure here. So we're looking to scale for routine surveillance and for other pathogens.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think for the sake of time, we have to close this part on the health and food infrastructure, and thank you for all your attention and questions and discussion. Then I pass to Bente for the next session.
Yeah, thank you. I'm from the social and cultural innovation domain, and we have only 5 landmark infrastructures in our domain. So we decided to leave the presentation to 2 research infrastructures, one from social sciences and one from humanities. So first I give the floor to Axel Bersch-Schuppan from SHARE. Axel, please.
Okay, now here we should go. Does that look good? So thanks, Bente, and thanks, Jan, for organizing this open session. I think this is a very good idea and very interesting. Niklas, I don't understand much about biology, but I'm always fascinated, and we'll come back to little biology even in SHARE. I'm not only representing SHARE, which is the Survey of Health, Aging, and Retirement in Europe, but actually the 3 social sciences infrastructures in ESFRI, the landmarks, and together with 2 infrastructures by the humanities, we form what is called ESFRI, a very, very fruitful cooperation between the 5 landmarks in social sciences and the humanities. Let me, before I go into more scientific detail, really thank Jan for pointing out the white paper and at showing the sort of where the white paper makes a difference. And I want to point out the left-hand lower corner, which is the coherence between European, national, and regional priorities. That was something Niklas mentioned at the very end, how important it is to have coherent strategies here. And I think this is particularly important in the social sciences. And I'll come back at the very end to this, but we really need the Commission as an instrument which has a coordinating function here. So I'm glad, Jan, that you pointed this out at the very beginning. Okay, social sciences. Now, many people ask why you need infrastructures in social sciences, and what they do is they are observatories for people's reaction to policies and events. And policies are, for example, my own hobby horse is pension reforms. People get extremely excited about this in all of the countries, but events are, of course, the COVID crisis. How do people react? And they react very differently. And that we need data to actually understand this. So this is one area where we need data, and now the other one is we need to understand why people react in the way. Why do people vaccinate in some countries very quickly, and there is a lot of the willingness to be vaccinated. In others, it is not the case. Why so? We use Europe, so to speak, as a laboratory, because some countries do it really well, other countries don't do it so well, and we can learn best practice by comparing countries. We cannot do ex-ante experiments, obviously, but the politicians provide a lot of variation where we learn from. And you see how important Europe is, because a single country will not be able to do this. And picking up a point made by Niklas, the data we have a tradition in the social sciences that data are free of charge. And they are widespread, and I think that that's one of the progresses we have made in science here. Okay, now a little bit, but I will be very, very quick talking about SHARE. SHARE looks at policy effects over the life course. We have 28 countries, all countries in the EU. Since about almost 16, 17 years, we observe always the same people, how they react to policy and events over time. By now, we have more than 500,000 interviews. They're all fact-based. So we want to, and I will go into detail a little later, we also have retrospective life histories. We know about their childhood, but we also collect blood. And we have a blood bank of most of our respondents. We are part of a global network. You see it really goes around the world, including developed countries and emerging countries. We try to find a really interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary picture of human life, because we think that health, social background, and economic situation are very, very closely related. People who are rich are usually healthier. People who are healthy are usually richer. And the causation goes in both ways. That's very important. So we have in SHARE a very broad range of factual questions about their socioeconomic status, their health, including a lot of biomarkers, also very modern biomarkers, and all the way to social participation, how people help each other with time and money. We do this by face-to-face interviews about every 2 years by trained interviewers. And the important thing is we link these data, very rich data about people, to health policies, social policies, and economic policies. That's where the power of the data comes in analyzing best practice across Europe. Now, what do we do in COVID? Exactly the same kind of thing. We think that how societies are affected by COVID-19, we need a holistic picture again. The effects of the pandemic, but also the lockdown measures, differ by previous life course experiences. We see the people who have been unemployed earlier in life also became more unemployment during the COVID crisis. It's always sort of a similar story. And we can sort of delineate this through health, economic situation, and social situation. The other important point is the effects on socioeconomic status, for example, vary a lot by pandemic severity, but also by lockdown stringency. And to keep those two apart is important. And we need the European Union to actually to be able to differentiate between lockdown stringency and pandemic severity. We have countries which are severely hit by the pandemic, but they have an easygoing policy, and we have the opposite. Countries which are hit not that much, but they have a very stringent lockdown. And we need all four combinations to really take them apart. So we look into the lockdown effects on health behaviors, for example. We look at healthcare inequalities. We look at labor market implications of a lockdown. We look at income inequality. Has that increased or not? And one of the nice applications is actually to get epidemic models where we feed the model with socioeconomic characteristics. For example, very obvious, how often do people meet? And these people are much more fine, these models are much more fine-grained than the models we use right now for the various waves of the epidemic. Again, I think the point which I want to bring home, it's really important to have a European dimension here, because otherwise we don't get the variation in policies and in pandemic stringent severity. Okay, we have collected a lot more data. I don't have the time to go into details here, but we asked people, for example, whether they wear consistently face masks, and there are big differences by socioeconomic background, by education, and by country. We follow up whether people are anxious about the virus, how many people get depressed. We look at overcrowding in hospitals, and you all remember the overcrowding at the very beginning in Italy. We look at reduced hours in work. Lots of people, actually almost a quarter of people, have reduced work hours and therefore lost income. And as a final example, we look at social relations, who gave help, who received help within the family, within neighborhoods. Again, that's very important because on the one hand side, giving and receiving help is very important, particularly for people with low income. On the other hand, it's also a mechanism to spread the virus. Again, we need this holistic picture, and that is what we did. Just very quick.
Sorry, Axel,
yeah.
You have 2 minutes left.
Okay. In descriptive results, we do see that the COVID-19 has increased social inequalities in healthcare. So especially those who were sick before and they are vulnerable in terms of poverty, for example, they suffer most in access to healthcare. They get the worst access in healthcare. Another finding is mental health went actually better for the older people and worse for the younger people. A very surprising result. And a consistent result, it was worse for women than for men. And the final thing is the damage, the economic damage, we can actually trace this quite well, was not caused by anxiety in face of the virus, but rather by the lockdown stringency. Okay. Now, ESS has a different tack. It looks at orientations, attitudes, values. It looked, for example, how people thought about their governments. They looked into conspiracy beliefs and trust in science. This is the way ESS looks at opinions and values. Chester is very important in our triangle of social science landmarks because they easily access the data, the quality of the data, and the efficiency by which data is collected. Let me finish with conclusions. First, modern social sciences need data, and they're very far from what they used to be, and they need data which is large-scale data of population surveys. This cannot be done by a single researcher. They really need infrastructures. This is where the infrastructures come in. It's a very wrong policy to look for excellent projects, but to cut down on infrastructures. It's exactly the opposite. We need infrastructures to have excellent projects. And I think that's a message which has to be strengthened by ESFRI. Major secular challenges like climate change, demographic change, but also the infections by COVID, first are science problems, but then they end up as social problems. And vaccination is a good example where we have to start with developing a vaccine, but then we have to convince the people to actually take it. And that can go wrong if we don't really understand the social science background of it. At the very end, my European message, the white paper has really shown how important the European dimension is. We can only understand the best practice, for example, in epidemiology or in other kind of economic and social policy, if we have Europe as a lab, as I call it. And the Commission is very, very needed, both in a coordinating, but also a funding role here. And I think that's another message ESFRI should really point out. We need the Commission to understand best practice in Europe, and we appreciate all the services of the Commission. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Axel. And we will immediately move on to a presentation of the humanities. So actually, if you stop sharing, yeah, thank you. And I give the floor to Francisca de Jong from Clarin, who will present the two humanities research infrastructures. Francisca, yeah.
Yeah, I still need to start my own video. Yes, here I am. Okay, good morning. Thanks for the invitation to present here the role that the research infrastructures from the humanities play in this overview of responses to the COVID pandemic. Axel has already presented a lot of the thinking behind the initiatives taken, namely that the pandemic is not only affecting health, but also the life course of people, and has created a lot of cultural and societal dynamics that is worth studying. And as I will explain to you, Claren and Daria each have taken up a role in documenting that and providing access to data and tools to enable the kind of studies that are being called for by the global situation that we're currently in. So as I said, the slides that I will present are prepared both by our contributions from Claren and Daria together. And also I will take you along with the role of the SHOCK project again, which is a very important driving force for coherence in the way the SSH research infrastructure can play their role. I would also like to underline once more, like all the previous speakers, how important the role and added value of research infrastructure has proven to be in this period. So it's a very strong virtual ecosystem that from day one of the lockdown period showed that the work can continue, that libraries may be closed, but all the data sets remain accessible. So research infrastructures play a vital role in disruptions in the scholarly infrastructure for social science and humanities. A few words about Daria, later on about Claren. So this is just summarizing what Daria is. Daria is the pan-European digital infrastructures for the arts and humanities research, and their mission is to empower research communities with digital methods and to create, connect, and share knowledge about culture and society. It's a quite old ERIC, landmark since 2018, 19 member countries and 1 observer. Their strategy is based on 4 pillars, and as you will understand, based on what I will present later on, each of their strategic pillars somehow plays a role in the way they approached the COVID-19 pandemic. For Claren, a little bit more detail, if you allow me. So Claren stands for the Common Language Resources and Technology Infrastructure. It provides access to digital language data in all formats. It also provides access to advanced tools for the processing of the data. And this is all done through a single sign-on environment, which is accessible for all scholars in humanities and social sciences, and even beyond. The Claren infrastructure also serves as an ecosystem for knowledge exchange, and some of the services have been integrated in the European Open Science Cloud from the start of the EOSC portal onwards. I would like to underline that the model that is implemented is similar to the model that was explained by Niklas Bromberg. Namely, it's a distributed data infrastructure, and all the data sits in the countries, in the national consortia, in the national institutes, and is made accessible by a central platform. But it means that all the assets in the infrastructure have been contributed by the work in the participating countries. It's maybe also good to underline the size of the population of researchers in the social science and humanities. This is estimated to be a population of 500,000 professional researchers. Okay, Claren has 21 members and 3 observer countries. And as I said, it's a distributed infrastructure, a network of over 60 centers, of which 25 have been independently or have been certified by an independent organization, Core Trust Seal. So there is federated login, there's central harvesting of metadata, and there are chained services that can be used. Many data types with many purposes and possibilities for use given the sharing model. many communities of use. In principle, everything in social science and humanities can benefit from the infrastructure, but also teachers, the general public, people working in speech therapy, cultural heritage, etc. Now, the story about the collaboration in the by the 5 or even more SSH research infrastructures. We are working towards better service alignment, so that the service offer that is envisaged to take place in the SSH open marketplace will serve the community or the communities in a harmonized way. This will also bring a lot of potential for multidisciplinary work, which is especially useful in the case of global issues. Also because it addresses a very specific feature of European research on social and cultural phenomena, namely the multilingual context. This has proven important during the pandemic, but it is of course also applicable to studies of climate change, migration, and the attitudes that the public has towards these issues. Another important issue is that we work with heterogeneous data, so both text and data of all kinds are treated in principle in an integrated manner, which is especially interesting, for example, in the case of the detection of disinformation. There are things related to speech data, but I won't go into that. Social survey data is another one that shows the importance of multidisciplinary work and the potential for multidisciplinary work. And then there's, of course, also the role of archives, libraries, digital cultural heritage, and web content. So we're very pleased with the funding that we have from the European Commission as a cluster, as a collaborative group of research infrastructures, working towards a common marketplace that is, of course, also coupled to the European Open Science Cloud. So now the responses. For Clarin, a major initiative is the work towards comparable parliamentary corpora that can be used to study the response in society and the public debate in parliament in all countries. The data, parliamentary data, is open by principle. So for over 20 languages, Clarin is now harmonizing the metadata so that studies can be set up to study the debates on societal impact, parliamentary debates, but also with through the coupling with newspaper data and other social channels. Linked data can be provided for the studies.
Yeah, 2 more minutes.
Yes, fine, thank you. In addition, we organized a hackathon for testing tools for the detection of misinformation on COVID. This is done by an existing community working on text and data mining, which also involves people from the European Commission. Again, multilinguality and translation are important topics here. Another initiative that recently started is the collaboration with the Periscope Project, which is a SEPS project funded under the Coronavirus Global Response Initiative. This project is investigating the pandemic based on statistical data, and in particular the socioeconomic and behavioral impacts. The collaboration with Clarin is aimed to study the combination of structured statistical data with weakly structured language data coming from all kinds of open channels. Daria has initiated a number of projects that is documenting the way COVID has affected ordinary cultural and scholarly life. So it's recording the impact of the virus and the pandemic on expressions and models of expression and engagement, so focusing on the visual. I have some concluding remarks. First of all, the societal and cultural dynamics in the pandemic is calling for a strong focus on heterogeneous data and the integrated study of it. The SSH data sets are very important for trend observations and measurements in a very direct manner. They don't require a lot of preparations. If you have the tools available, the newspaper of this morning can already be a source of information. So this is, of course, also applicable for future disasters. We do like to use this discussion to plea for sustainable investments in the SSH infrastructure and the scholarly communities connected. The interoperability of the services is not only beneficial in the case of this COVID pandemic, but also serving the work on the European Horizon Europe missions and the Sustainable Development Goals. We do think that the cluster structure is a crucial success factor for sustainable impact. And last but not least, the attention for diversity issues from the research infrastructures in SSH domain can be seen as fueling, again, the coherence between European, national, and regional priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franziska. And yes, thank you. We do have a little bit of time, very short time for discussion. But I can see there was a question to Axel, but it seems to have been answered already in the chat. Axel, do you want to add anything?
Well, the one question was whether we have data on the immediate environment of people. For example, the concrete example where how close is the next food store? Yes, we do. And we collect neighborhood characteristics and we know that they are important, again, both for epidemiological models, but also just to understand the situation in which people are.
Yeah, and there was the question from Agnieszka on identify reasons for differences in reactions to COVID between young and old and between men and women.
Yeah, and my answer was, of course, this is our core business. This is what social scientists do all the time. They write tables always with age and sometimes sex, sometimes gender, carefully differentiating effects in a very heterogeneous society. And we not only look at old and young, but for example, we distinguish very carefully the very old and those who are at least from my perspective, young, but from the perspective of my kids, rather old already. So society is quite complicated, and we try to get the fine tunes as well.
But Axel, I think there's also another question in the same direction here. Do you have some analysis of the reasons for these differences? You can just say yes or no, and then we can send the...
Yeah, of course. Particularly economists are always interested in causal chains. And what I'm personally very interested in is the combination of biological and economic causal chains. And that is in health very relevant, because there's this permanent interaction between social status and biological mechanisms. For example, sort of the easiest way to understand this is in the access to healthcare, where you see the difference between rich and poor, and that has consequences for your body after all. And these interactions are long causal chains, which start at early childhood and then go through the entire life. And they're actually vicious circle or beneficious circles. So the causality is an important point.
Yeah, thank you. And there seems to be no more questions, so I think I give the floor back to Jan.
Yes, Thank you, colleagues, and very interesting discussion indeed. And it shows how visionary we have been when formulating some of the recommendations or messages from the white paper. Even so, it has to be understood that now it seems rather simple-minded and quite obvious, but it shall be remembered that this white paper is an effort which started already in 2017. So far ahead of the COVID crisis, and still the COVID crisis and probably all the other crises to come have proven some of our considerations very relevant, and all the contributions you have been presenting in this open session also clearly demonstrated that jointly we have a real added value, and that research infrastructures are really, as I am trying always to advocate in all the policy fora, the kernel of to be seriously considered when speaking about European science as such, because it's not just a collection of scientific instruments. It's also an impetus for cultural change. It's really a platform for communicating things, for bridging differences between scientific disciplines, for doing many things which on an individual research level would be rather difficult. So let's hope for a brighter future for research infrastructures in the new era, and let's forget about some of the drawbacks we've experienced when it came to budget considerations for the New Horizon Europe. I have also noted from several of you that ESFRI still has a reasoning in this integrated landscape of research infrastructures. I hope we can stand to the expectations here, and we can really pay much more attention to the voices which are coming from the stakeholders like you or the others, and jointly emphasize the effort so to propagate not only research infrastructure but European science, the benefits of the society. Thank you indeed for the participation. Thank you for helping to develop this instrument, which still has to be improved, but I hope it will be proven in the future a very useful tool for both ways communication, and it will complement all the activities we are now doing at the ESFRI level in order to make all our advices more merit-based and science relevant. So thank you. See you someone at latest in the stakeholder forum in Ljubljana in the end of the year. Let's hope for a face-to-face meeting, even so we are ready for a hybrid or even a fully remote meeting. And I would like to advertise to all the ESFRI members that the forum shall start soon, so please move to the other room. Thank you all again, and keep safe.